People held a vibrant demonstration in most parts of Amhara cities and towns condemning the intervention of Western nations in the internal affairs of Ethiopia. On the occasion, President of the region Dr. Yilqal Kafale said it is through internal unity that Ethiopia can defeat any power like forefathers did. Modo Muliye has more on this.
Flew the flag of Ethiopia into the sky of Bahar Dar city. Thousands took to the wide Meskel Square. High government officials, including Chief of the Amhara Regional State, Dr. Yilqal Kafale, religious leaders, former Ethiopian Defense Force members and patriots, people in the music and arts industry, teachers and students, all have something in common: their homeland Ethiopia. They turned out in mass for a peaceful demonstration condemning the West's illegitimate intervention and pressure in the internal issues of a sovereign state. The demonstrators carried written messages and slogans: Hands off Ethiopia. TPLF is the cause of all the atrocities. Disarm TPLF for a sustainable peace. Stop intervention in our internal issues in the name of humanitarian aids. Respect our sovereignty. No more proxy war. We salute those who have stood with Ethiopia are a few of the many messages. Chief of the Amhara Regional State, Dr. Yilqal Kafale, spoke on the occasion.
In the past, when some foreign powers came against our sovereignty, when they tried to humiliate the dignity of our homeland, our fathers and forefathers stood up together, fought back and triumphed over them. And today, the fact that this crowd of people has turned out to stand together and defend the sovereignty of our country proves that we are the true children of our fathers.
Dr. Yilqal added that the war that TPLF has waged against Ethiopia is a proxy war.
When the people of Amhara and Afar were attacked, killed and displaced, when their properties were looted and destroyed by the terrorist TPLF, the West were silent. But now, when it is being fought back and defeated by the Ethiopian lions, the West are shouting louder than TPLF itself. And this proves that TPLF is a Trojan horse. It is having a proxy war.
The president called on the people to strengthen internal unity in order to resist external pressures and interventions. Secretary of Opposition Parties Coalition Council Yideg Maru on his part said that the council condemns any external power that tries to support the terrorist TPLF.
We competing political parties sincerely condemn those countries, organizations and individuals who are acting against the peace, unity and sovereignty of our country.
The demonstrators told Amhara Media Corporation that no power can dismantle Ethiopia.
Ethiopia never collapses. Look, this is what we have inherited from our ancient fathers and mothers. No power can stop us from standing in unison for our sovereignty.
No one can let Ethiopia bend its head. To those foreign powers who do not like Ethiopia, we say hands of our country. You foreign powers have to know one thing: we Ethiopians are one and one forever.
Besides Bahar Dar, the public rally was held across other cities and towns in the region, and this is part of the nationwide peaceful demonstration condemning external interventions and pressures in internal issues of Ethiopia.
Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Affairs Minister Demeqe Mekonnen called for modernizing and transforming the African statistics ecosystem to support effective decision-making for development plans at national, regional and global levels. Let's get more from Modo Muliye.
Most African countries have had some success in reforming and updating government status.
Addressing the joint opening session of back-to-back meetings taking place this week in Addis Ababa as part of the 8th Statistical Commission for Africa, Demeke underlined that official statistical data play a crucial role in aiding policymakers and other decision-makers to achieve sustainable development. He stressed the need for comprehensive tools that can enable governments to create and execute the policies required to achieve the digital goals needed for regional integration as effectively as possible. Demeke said he is confident that these meetings will produce agreed-upon recommendations and solutions to strengthen the African national statistical system in order to produce high-quality data for monitoring the development plans of their respective countries' Agenda 2063 and Agenda 2030 for sustainable development. According to him, much of Africa's key successes in reforming and modernizing national statistical systems have been attributable to non-traditional abilities such as statistical leadership, political engagement, inventiveness, and communications.
Most African countries have had some success in reforming and updating government status to meet the needs of national development, including but not limited to the use of digital technology. Nonetheless, resulting from both demand and supply side constraints, countries continue to face common transformation and modernizing challenges. This includes, among others, data ecosystems, which are increasingly offering new opportunities, fostering the usage of digital data and technology for development in the continent.
He further added African governments should play in altering and enhancing national statistics systems by setting a budget that is both adequate and sustainable. The Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Affairs Minister also expressed his government's commitment to further support the efforts of the Ethiopian statistics system to deliver accurate and timely data for planning and decision-making based on evidence. In a keynote address at the 8th session of the Statistical Commission for Africa, Chris Barry-Monsi, Uganda's Minister for ICT and National Guidance, stressed the need to develop agile statistical systems that are resilient to crises such as COVID-19, which heavily impacted statistical production in national statistical systems. He emphasized the need to improve administrative data and civil registration systems, which together account for up to 70% of the data required to monitor national development processes. Organized under the theme Modernizing Data Ecosystem in Africa to support regional integration, the 8th Statistical Commission for Africa seeks to strengthen the interrelated natural linkages between data, statistics, and civil registration. The Statistical Commission for Africa is the highest decision-making body in Africa, responsible for setting statistical standards, developing concepts and methods, and implementing them at the national, sub-regional, and continental levels. The meeting provides an opportunity for participants to discuss the link between African and global statistical systems to ensure that Africa is not left behind in global statistical initiatives. Furthermore, the meeting will serve as a platform for international partners to meet representatives of member states of the Economic Commission for Africa to discuss the needs of those member states. The United Nations Global Geospatial Information Management for Africa was established to coordinate African geospatial development and to contribute to the wider global initiative. It has adopted realistic approaches to ensure that systematic and comprehensive frameworks are put in place, along with related policies, resources, and systems to make geospatial information technology easily accessible to decision makers and the community in a coordinated way.
The African Union announced it has launched peace talks to end the conflict in the Tigray region of Ethiopia. Birhanu Workneh has more on this.
A statement released yesterday by African Union said the chairperson of the African Union Commission, Musa Faki Mahamat, is pleased to announce the launch in South Africa of the first direct talks between the government of Ethiopia and the Tigray People's Liberation Front, TPLF. The talks are facilitated by Olusegun Obasanjo, the African Union High Representative for the Horn of Africa and former President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, along with former President Uhuru Kenyatta of the Republic of Kenya and former Deputy President Dr. Famzel Malabo of the Republic of South Africa. It was indicated that representatives of the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, IGAD, the United Nations, and the government of the United States of America are participating as observers to the AU-led peace process. In this regard, the chairperson expresses his profound appreciation to President Cyril Ramaphosa and the government of South Africa graciously for accepting to host the talks in the spirit of Pan-African solidarity to find African solutions to African problems. The chairperson reiterates the African Union's continued commitment to support AU-led process to silence the guns towards a united, stable, peaceful and resilient Ethiopia.
According to the Office of the Prime Minister, the Council of Ministers has approved 4 draft regulations during its 4th regular session. Let's get the details from Abebe Brahane.
A statement by the Council stated that the draft regulations were about the establishment of the Ethiopian Agricultural Research Institute, government employees, Social Security Administration and private organization employees, Social Security Administration, as well as the reorganization of the Ethiopian Construction Authority. First, the Council discussed the draft regulation for the establishment of the Ethiopian Agricultural Research Institute. The draft regulation aimed at establishing an institute with a clear mission and duty to achieve the country's agricultural activities using technologies and achieving export with effective research, coordination, support and strengthened institutional linkage. The Council of Ministers decided that the regulation become effective from the day of its publication on the Nagarit Gazette. Secondly, the Council discussed the draft regulation to determine the authority, function and organization of the Ethiopian Construction Authority. The regulation aimed to modernize the construction industry to compete with current trends for effective construction activities. It decided the regulation to become effective from the day of its publication on the Nagarit Gazette. Finally, the Council discussed and approved the draft regulation to establish government employees Social Security Administration and private organization employees Social Security Administration. The Council decided the regulations to take effect from the date of its publication on the Nagarit Gazette.
The American political economic analyst Lawrence Freeman said many Western institutions, media and governments want to make the terrorist TPLF relevant in making Ethiopia ungovernable. Birhanu Warqaneh has prepared the detail of this story.
The analyst underscored that Ethiopia has been under repeated attacks by these Western forces due to the country's policy success and its potential in development in the African continent. According to him, some forces in the Western which have the tendency to control Africa have used the conflict in northern Ethiopia as a means to eliminate the government of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. He noted, as Ethiopia has been making significant military advancement in its counter-offensive against TPLF, various Western institutions, media and governments have come out threatening Ethiopia.
If the government of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed does not institute immediate ceasefire.
For him, this is the extension of the long-term policy from forces in the West that do not want independent political leaders controlling African nations like the Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. Therefore, these forces have engaged in a constant destabilization of Ethiopia and try to make the country ungovernable.
I think what is going on with various individuals, now they're all different. For example, if you take let me just finish a sentence. I think what's going on is that these oligarchical geopolitical forces, they want to keep the TPLF around. They don't want them eliminated. They don't want them assimilated into a Republic of Ethiopia. Even though they probably cannot win militarily or ever resume complete power, but they can be relevant in making Ethiopia ungovernable. Now, if you look at Tedros, the chief of the WHO, WHO, and you see that his statement really violates his position, and he should be considered resigning because he's clearly taken a very pro Tigray TPLF position. Actually, not Tigray, but pro TPLF position. And as a member of a major organization of the UN, this really is a violation because he's very blunt about it.
The American analyst pointed out that forces in the United Nations, European Union and United States want to keep the TPLF around to sustain the divisive ethnic group in Ethiopian body politics, calling that nonsense. Freeman also criticized the double standards of the West, repeatedly mentioning the northern Ethiopian problem, that of only Tigray the victim. But they don't mention the millions of people who have been displaced in Amhara and Afar regions. He urged the West are responsible for the problem in Ethiopia, adding that if there had been full support for the government of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed from the very beginning, there would not have been this human suffering.
If the international community, in the West in particular, including Gutierrez, the UN General Secretary, and others, and Anthony Blinken, and President Biden, and the European Union, if they had supported the government, this would never have reached these conditions.
The analyst also noted that at this time, Ethiopia is under repeated attacks by the Western allegorical forces due to the country's policy success and potential in development in Africa. This is the extension of the long-term policy from forces in the West he called allegorical forces, which do not want independent political leaders to control the African nations. He pointed out that these forces do not want to see the African government developing their nations. The analyst believes that it is because of the success of its policy as well as its potential for development that attracted the vicious attack on the government of Ethiopia. He elaborated, despite the war in northern Ethiopia, the country is pursuing a path eliminating poverty and promoting development, including light industry and light manufacturing. Hopefully, the country will transform into heavy manufacturing. The progress on the construction of the Grand Ethiopia Renaissance Dam and the nation's independent industrial policy in manufacturing parks could be something that will be imitated by other African nations. The American analyst said these successes by the Prime Minister and the Prosperity Party have brought about discomfort to these allegorical parties in the West, and now they are fueling chaos in Ethiopia. He pointed out they are particularly played the ethnic polarization card in Ethiopia body politics, which was introduced by TPLF.
The reason that Ethiopia is under attack is because of its potential in development and its leadership in economic development. So this is not hard to understand. However, what is hard to understand, and which I would hope my friends in leadership positions, Ethiopians, is you have to understand the long waves of history that go back thousands of years of the struggle between oligarchism and what we could either call humanism or republicanism. These battles continue today, and to ignore them as unimportant, to fail to comprehend them, puts you in a weakened position.
Prime Minister said at this time the Western forces have been pressing the Ethiopian government to declare immediate ceasefire in order to rescue TPLF, adding that this indicates desperation in their part. Freeman believed that it is important to militarily defeat the insurgent rebel group that has been trying to overthrow the elected government. The elimination of ethnicity as a political entity in Ethiopia is also important.
In today's review, we have prepared former Prime Minister of Ethiopia Haile Mariam Desalegny's speech regarding a high-level forum security on Africa. Stay tuned again. The 10th Tana High-Level Forum on Security in Africa under the theme Managing Security Threats Building Resilience for the Africa We Want has been held in Bahir Dar, Ethiopia from 14 to 16 October 2022. The forum complements formal meeting of Africa heads of state and government by assembling them in an informal collaborative environment. In the spirit of gatherings taking place under the Baobab tree, the forum offers room and space for panel discussions, interaction with the floor and bilateral talks to share views and experiences in a time-efficient, result-oriented and open manner. As part of the forum, there was panel discussion in the latest forum. Former Prime Minister of Ethiopia Haile Mariam Desalegn was the one among the participants who have given an explanation in relation to the forum and regarding to security in Africa. In his briefing at the beginning, he has elaborated the genesis of Tana High-Level Forum on Security in Africa.
Let me take you back on the genesis of Tana Forum. How did our forefathers has envisioned Tana Forum, and what did they expect, and are we up to that expectation, is the main question I want to address. You know, then I will take you back to the transformation of Organization of African Unity into the African Union. You know, there has been two camps. One is the Gaddafi camp, which was trying to bring United States of Africa, and the other camp, which I will later explain who they are, is the G4, the group of four that included my predecessor, Prime Minister Meles Zenawi, Chief Olusegun Obasanjo, and President Thabo Mbeki, and President Bouteflika of Algeria. These were the G4, they call it, some of them, the Gaddafi camp say them as Gang of Four, because they were not allowing Gaddafi to go into his liking to bring, those African chiefs and bring them as heads of those federalist states. I think the whole idea was to transform the African political and political economy landscape. And in this regard, if you remember right, one of the transformations that has taken place was establishing the new Partnership for African Development, NEPAD, if you remember. And then the other one is to take our internal issues by ourselves rather than pushed by external forces for us. So we need a governance that is led by ourselves, and then African peer review mechanism should be in place for the governance in Africa, because they understood and they envisioned that the governance system in Africa is dysfunctional, and therefore we need to have a peer review mechanism to handle our internal issues by Africans themselves. Along this line, the security issue has been one of the critical things in the discussion. And finally, they established a group of four, where when I was foreign minister, I was also part of that discussion. So I know how the establishment of Tana Forum has come into place.
The former Premier of Ethiopia has also forwarded his evaluation about the forum itself in relation to the aim it had been established to achieve, especially with reference to creating platform for debate out of which an African policy ought to be based.
I think now the question is Tana Forum as it was envisioned by this G4? You know, we always say Tana Forum brings intellectuals, academicians, researchers, civil society groups, partners, and all stakeholders, including youth and women, into one platform so that we will try to transform the debate itself. Because in Africa, there is lack of debate on certain specific issues. Therefore, the idea was to transform the debate. To me, I think we haven't yet to that level at Tana Forum, even though Tana Forum has many important and burning issues discussed in the last 9 editions, but we are not up to the depths of the debate which has to take place. Look what happened earlier to us. The panelists were asked to leave without any debate. And so it's a little embarrassing when you see this happens. But nonetheless, we haven't had a depth and a deep analysis on the situation. So TANA was established by our forefathers to look into African peace and security architecture in a very deep manner, and understand it and support the African Union as an institution to take the ideas that are generated from this forum for policy formulation. That was the whole idea. So I think, again, we have to reform TANA Forum properly so that few agendas can be discussed in depth, and therefore we can lead the process in such a manner.
Mr. Hailemariam Desalegn has also explained about the need to review Africa's partnership with other external bodies in order to correct injustice international actors have forcefully put on Africa.
But the new partnership for African development was initiated and it derailed now from its initial vision, simply because the idea was the global institutions that exist has embedded injustice in them. Therefore, we have to have a new kind of partnership with our partners globally. Look into the UN system. Again, the Bretton institutions, like the unholy trinity, they call it unholy trinity, that the World Bank, IMF, and WTO. This relationship is, in itself, has, some of the researchers say, inbuilt violence. You know that insecurity happens if there is violence. And the violence is, some researchers also divide them as direct violence and structural violence. To me, we haven't addressed the structural violence at TANA Forum. We have been trying to have a firefighting brigade to discuss about those direct violence that's happening along the entire continent. But I want to emphasize that the structural violence has a lots of meaning if we can address them properly.
Hailemariam has pointed out new partnership for Africa's development, NEPAD, as an instance for Africans' engagement towards changing external injustices on its relation.
NEPAD was established, and then after NEPAD, many people might not know that the BRICS idea has come from Africa. It's not an Asia idea or Brazil's idea. It was an African idea. It was initiated by the G4. And I think this has a very great meaning why Africa is trying to bring justice into the global system. The BRICS was established to counter the Western or the Northern Hemisphere's influence into our African agenda. And later on, you remember, again, the BRICS Bank also being established. That was, again, to counter the World Bank's injustice that is embedded into the system. So it was South Africa, Ethiopia, Nigeria, and Algeria together. They envisioned for an alternative global system that can help us to address insecurity in Africa. I mean, when we talk about peace and security, this is a very important issue.
The former Premier of Ethiopia has also briefed the importance of having inward looking to solve problems of Africa.
But nonetheless, I'm not trying to externalize things, but to us Africans, the most important thing is to look into our internal issues. When we talk about structural violence, we have in our own continent structural violence embedded in our specific systems. For example, I can take my own country, Ethiopia, where we are now. You know, in our own country, my own country, there has been injustice embedded into the system that people try to address it by addressing, you know, the group right in terms of ethnicity, ethnic right kind of approach. That has degenerated now, you know, ethnic violence in different parts of the country because we haven't properly addressed the injustice embedded in the country. So similarly, we have to look into our internal issues rather than focusing on external bodies, even though, again, the external influence has huge ramification when it comes to our security and peace in Africa. So I think this is one of the basic things we have to look into.
As long as the Africa people is living in diversified nature, Mr. Hailemariam briefed the participants Africa needs to work on strengthening human security through appropriately managing diversity.
My sister Anna was talking about territorial and regime security vis-a-vis human security. And the transformation that has to take place now is not about territorial security or regime security, but about human security. When we talk about human security, I think we have to be able to manage diversity, which was the main case in Tana Forum. If you remember, the first two Tana Forum editions, they were dealing with managing diversity and state fragility. That was one of the main issues that we wanted to deal with human security by managing diversity, which is embedded in many parts, inequality, marginalization of certain groups, that is becoming the source of insecurity in our continent. So again, we have seen in our second Tana Forum and the third one, the impact of illicit financial flows into, you know, outside world. That has also a very important, you know, embedded issue, because if the governance system is not right, then again people will be resenting and our internal security will be vulnerable.
As to him, corruption and illicit financing has tempted Africa in its partnership with others. He said this could also need to be solved through activities from in to outside direction.
And we see corruption and illicit financial flow in Africa, and we have to look into ourselves. You know, some people might say it is our colonial masters or external actors who are trying to, you know, push this illicit financial flow because it's associated with them. Some even mention the case of DRC, where there are a number of actors working in DRC, including the peacekeeping mission of the United Nations, who have stayed there for several years, and there is no peace to keep for so long period of time. But billions and billions of dollars are invested in. So I think even then we have to look into our own internal issues, because that's our problem, our lack of good governance problem, rather than external forces coming to influence the insecurity in our continent. So I think looking inside, you know, making our problem as an internal problem is very essential.
Finally, the former Prime Minister of Ethiopia, Hailemariam Desalegn, has talked about the peace and security architecture of Africa, which has been taught and commenced before years, mentioning challenges of practicing this architecture.
We have designed, in our Tana Forum, we also discussed about the African peace and security architecture. One of the pillars is Peace Fund, which President Mahama yesterday has reported in his 2021 State of Peace and Security in Africa about those architectures. When you look into a peace fund, that has been established by 1930 something, 13. But that was there during even OAU, but has never been implemented until recently. And a single coin has not been put into that fund for so long. And I was thinking, what happened? We were expecting the money to come from somewhere. African Union is operating 75% of its operations by external financing. So how can we make peace and security in Africa? By, outsourcing our own business to somebody and trying to see that we are trying to solve our peace and security problem in Africa. I think that's entirely, it's not possible to do that. So why this is not happening? One of my Ghanaian friend has sent me, he's trying to establish the African Public Media Initiative, and he sent me some notes